Now that you understand the difference between a freelance translator and a translation service, we can finally compare them. Back at Black Dog Communications, you were told to use Daniel as a translator. You will find the assumptions and a link to All Is Well in the description below. The assumptions are that Daniel is an employee, that he speaks the language, that the translation can be kept in-house, and that all of this will result in savings. Knowing what you do now about the translation process, do you believe these assumptions are true? You might want to discuss these questions with others in the comments below or on my Facebook page. You'll find the link in the description. Recall that the total cost of using a freelance translator was $15,240. The bulk of this cost fell on the instructional designer, who must cut and paste the original text into a document the translator can read. The instructional designer then must cut and paste the translation back into the original software. Now let's take the same project and see what it will cost using a translation service. Remember, this project had 22,077 words. The first two rows of this table are labeled Words No Match and Words Repetitions. The first row, Words No Match, are words that have no match in the translation memory, TM. Remember, we populated this memory from the glossary you provided to the translation vendor. Word repetitions are the words you provided for the glossary, as well as any previous translations that the TM retained for the same language. Words with no match cost 16 cents per words to translate, for a total cost of $2,007. Word repetitions cost only 6 cents to translate, for a total of $572. If they had no match and were translated at 16 cents a word, this cost would be $1,496.96. By having a TM, you save $924.96. When we add the word count for each of these rows, we get 12,541 plus 9,536 equals 22,077. As the glossary increases and more projects are completed, the TM discount increases. The translation error rate also decreases with each translation. That is why it is important to build a relationship with a translation vendor rather than taking the lowest bid for each project. By building a relationship with a TMS vendor, you save time and money. In this table, we compare the cost of a translator against the service. The cost charged by the translator was 14 cents per word. At a glance, this looks better, because the initial translation service cost is 16 cents per word. When the TM is accounted for, you get a discount for repetition. Using a TM results in a savings of $512. Next, let's look at localization engineering. Localization engineering refers to the process performed when the text is extracted, translated, reviewed, and re-imported using the TMS. This does not apply to a translator, since the ID or technical writer does this work, so there is no cost. This cost is $2,350. The next cost is audio. This does not differ, although a translation service can often provide you with professional audio talent, saving you the effort of managing it yourself. If you source audio through the translation service, the integration of the audio is managed by the localization engineer. For both translation methods, there is still an ID cost. Someone must manage the project, although it could be someone other than the ID. Using a freelance translator, the ID cost is $9,365. This is where you see the biggest cost savings. If you decide to use a translation vendor, the cost is only $1,050. The automation provided by a TMS can really save you money, particularly on large projects. Why such a large disparity? As we discussed earlier, the cost of cutting and pasting is expensive. The money you thought you were saving by hiring Aunt Sarah and using internal people is an illusion. It is very laborious to translate this way. Realistically, you need to add the localization cost to the ID cost. $2,350 plus $1,050 equals $3,400. The localization engineer replaces the cutting and pasting done by the ID. Now when we compare the cost of extracting the text and importing the translations, we see a savings of $965 by using a translation service. The overall cost of using a translation service for this project is nearly half the cost of using a translator. If you'd like to study this more carefully, you'll find a PDF version of this table at my website on the Resources tab. The link is in the description. In sourcing translation, you learn the skills required by a translator and how a translation operates when you use a freelancer. You learn the role of the instructional designer or technical writer in the process. You learn the terminology of translation services and the importance of building a glossary and translation memory. Throughout this chapter, you learned how translation is priced, and finally, you learned how you can save money by building a translation memory and using a translation service. Stay tuned for the next chapter, Managing the Translation, beginning with the video, Planning for Translation Using SMART Goals. Thanks for watching.